¿Cómo sería esto? A ver. Es que es jodidiño, ¿eh? A ver. No me gusta, no me gusta. Vale, ya estamos hablando de algo. Oh, madre que lo parió. Hostia, pero esto está muy chico, tío. Vale. Algo es algo. Vaya, pero no pasó nada. A ver. Esta en verdad es buena también. Vale. Vamos a hacer una prueba. Exportar como PNG. Venga. ¿La acabo de turbolear? Igual sí, ¿eh?
Visual you can use them all. I've made these for you so you don't have to. Anyway.
Necesitamos que sea simple y este asset pack está en 32 píxeles por unidad. También vamos a cambiar aquí que sea punto sin filtro y la compresión le vamos a quitar para que tenga máxima calidad. Lo vamos a aplicar, pero esto sería tedioso hacerlo cada vez con todos los sprites que vamos a utilizar, así que vamos a crear un preset. Venimos a este icono de acá y nos va a abrir acá. Podemos crear un nuevo preset, le damos doble clic, vamos a seleccionar esta carpeta presets para guardar.
Vale, confirmo que la he turboleado. Pero sí es más divertido, joder.
Hey everyone, what's up? It's Chad Inglis. I'm content design lead on Stellaris.
Hi everyone, this is Matthias from the programmers team. So let's talk a bit about the Behemoth Crisis Path and what this new big boy can do for you.
So when we began, there's a little bit of time for us to consider, but like, well, what makes that actually go? What makes that tick? Giant monster on the next monster. What are the repercussions of creating a giant space monster? What if the giant space on the next we came up with of we can giant
to click transitions a couple of times and solution also you can then use on your unsuspecting victims. Those a bit combat so unleash your
great to try to build giants is that creature, but now how do we get it to do what we want? But what becomes
Vale, no sé de qué ha servido esto, pero vale, ya sé de cómo servía. Vale. Confirmo que la he turboleado.
Y nos crearlo cada vez que tenga máxima calidad. Punto sin
Ah, sí, sí.
filtro, nuevo preset, le damos doble clic. Namespace por defecto, tutorial. Ya aplicamos una excepción por cell size. Vamos a poner 32 por 32. Slice. Aplicamos yes y apply. Vean, ya está cortado. Así que lo cerramos. Y ahora vamos a crear nuestros tilemaps. Venimos acá, 2D, tilemap, y vamos a crear unos rectángulos.
Hola, escenas.
rectangular. 2D, tile map, y vamos a crear uno rectangular. Vean que lo crea por debajo de un objeto padre que es la grid. Necesitamos una grid. Entonces este tile map le vamos a llamar background 1. Lo voy a duplicar con control D. Y a este le vamos a llamar background 2 porque vamos a tener varios. Incluso vamos a crear otro que este sí le voy a llamar midground. Y por delante vamos a tener foreground, donde van a ir las decoraciones. Creo que van a haber dos, porque son varias.
Caso.
Para cada uno de acá, agregar sorting layer. Sorting layer solo tiene la por defecto, así que vamos a darle acá a agregar sorting layer. Y vamos a crear una que le vamos a dar background.
Can you deploy to our data center?
I'd love to.
Are you glitching?
I'd love to.
When you need your AI solution to run anywhere, you need Red Hat. Keep your options open.
Otra midground y otra para foreground. Entonces, recapitulando, background sería para los fondos, para montañas, nubes y todo lo que es decoraciones distantes. Midground vamos a poner los elementos jugables, los más importantes, como el suelo, paredes. Y foreground va a ser para objetos que estén en primer plano, incluso delante del jugador, como por ejemplo esas pequeñas hierbas que vamos a poner enseguida. Así que ahora vamos a asignar acá sus respectivos layers. A background 1 y 2 le ponemos background, a midground le vamos a poner midground y a foreground podemos seleccionar los dos con control y directamente foreground. Y como les decía, tenemos el grid padre que tiene este componente grid que pueden incluso cambiarle el tamaño de la celda e igual moverle. Por ejemplo, aquí le podrían dar 2 en X y demás. La cámara también, si quieren, pueden hacerla más grande, más chica, dependiendo. Yo le voy a bajar un poco. 3.16. Y también voy a bajarle el tamaño de los gizmos. Acá voy a bajar un poco para que no moleste demasiado. Voy a volver acá. Y vamos a crear ahora nuestro tile palette. Acá en este panel, si no les sale, pueden ir acá a Window, 2D, Tile Palette. Y como ven, aquí arriba tiene bastantes herramientas para manipular, pero necesitamos antes crear una nueva Tile Palette. Así que acá vamos a darle crear nueva Tile Palette. Le podemos dar el nombre. Yo le voy a poner terreno. Terrain Palette. Creamos. La vamos a guardar acá. Había creado una carpeta Tile Maps. Vamos a crear un nuevo folder. Terrain. Y dentro vamos a guardar la paleta. ¿Está bien? Ahora no tenemos nada en la paleta, así que vamos a arrastrar nuestras sprites. Vamos acá, Palm Tree, Sprites. Vamos a terreno y acá tenemos nuestros sprites que lo vamos a arrastrar acá, y cuando los arrastramos va a crear tile assets. Así que dentro de lo que es
Vale.
vamos acá, Palm Tree, Sprite, Vamos a terreno y acá tenemos nuestros sprites que lo vamos a arrastrar. Acá. Y cuando los arrastramos va a crear tile assets. Así que dentro de lo que es tile maps, terreno, podemos crear acá tile assets. Y allí se van a crear. Listo, ya lo tenemos. Acá está por ahora nuestra paleta. También acá podemos seleccionar el tile map en el cual queremos pintar. Me imagino que como esto es principal, lo del terreno, les había dicho que en midground va a ir. Vamos a agregar acá la grilla, igual acá activar para que ustedes puedan ver. Y ahora sí vamos a empezar a pintar nuestro escenario. Como les había dicho, acá hay varias herramientas. Sobre todo vamos a utilizar el brush o el pincel y el borrador, que fíjense aquí a la derecha indica D como tecla rápida. Para el brush o el pincel igual B. Podemos rellenar, girar y demás. Así que voy a seleccionar esta tile, la que ven acá, y vamos a empezar a pintar el suelo. 1, 2, 3, 4. Luego podemos venir acá y vamos a seleccionar esta para que tengamos una esquina. Luego vamos a intentar pintar una pared que suba acá. Recuerden, todos estamos pintando en la tile map de midground. Acá voy a seleccionar esta para ir haciendo los bordes. Ahora esta. Ahora le vamos a agregar un pico. Y en esta parte tenemos acá para poder hacer mejor la esquina. Y fíjense ahora, en vez de seleccionar en la paleta, puedo seleccionar con esta herramienta. Luego continuar en la acá y a unir el herramienta que es una caja negro. Rellenar, voy a ocultar midground. Vamos a rellenar el herramienta que era esta. Y si igual podemos al pero apply 32 y vamos en el modo que perfecto, sí se está animando. Vamos a pintar esto nos ha creado. Ahora podemos nombre de animate from animated tile. Le vamos a poner from palm. Poner el número o directamente, voy a bloquear aquí a la derecha, o directamente arrastrar y ya tenemos nuestros 4 frames para la animación. Una vez hayamos creado nuestro, vamos a crear una nueva paleta y mando. Han visto que no está funcionando tan bien, así que igual esto pueden reubicarlo. Lo vamos a llevar a nuestra zona de tile maps animated. La velocidad mínima para este caso le vamos a poner 7 y que un máximo de 10. Vamos a volver a probar play. Vean, ya se mueve mucho más natural. Y ahora vamos a crear los animated tiles para las palmeras que se ven de blue. Haré un poco aquí a game y vean, es lo que queremos que tenga de la visión. Y voy a activar solamente el midground, que es lo que queremos que tenga los colliders, porque el suelo y las paredes no se pueden traspasar por el jugador o por los objetos que vayamos a colocar. Al tile map midground le vamos a agregar un componente tile map collider 2D. Vean, le he agregado este componente y me crea alrededor de cada tile asset un cuadradito, ¿no? Que está bien, pero que es un poco ineficiente. Así que, aparte de eso, vamos a agregarle un rigid body para que realmente pueda hacer efecto. Lo vamos a poner como estático, como es suelo, lo vamos a poner como estático, simulado. Y aparte de esto, Para mejorar la eficiencia vamos a utilizar lo que es el Composite Collider 2D. Aparentemente no ha ocurrido nada, pero es porque acá en el Tilemap Collider la operación tenemos que cambiarla a una de estas. En este caso le vamos a dar que sea Merge. Y vean, ahora sí tenemos un solo collider alrededor. Por eso que en las demostraciones el pirata podía pisar el suelo y si saltaba también no podía salir por las paredes. Todo eso lo vamos a ver en videos diferentes porque la parte de lo que son las nubes, que ver con, ya lo había mencionado, es el control para su propio desarrollo de videojuegos, que es el state pattern, para poder pasar entre estados como idle, correr, atacar, etc. Así
21. Dos de Unit 6, 2 de tileset, top down. A 24.
Eso no lo canta nadie. No te comas la cabeza y disuelve tus cacaos fácilmente, como un squeak. Cacao disuelto, cacao resuelto.
Perdón. Joder, con el anuncio.
In this video, we're going to get our tile map set up where we'll be able to walk in front of our layers or behind them or collide with them and also add decor. We'll go through the plan. Getting your tile map layers down correctly at the beginning is important for your game, otherwise it can quickly become a mess. So first, let's plan out our layers that we actually want. So we're going to have to start thinking a little bit three-dimensional and think about things layering on top of each other. So of course our very bottom layer, something we're going to want to walk on top of and everything else should be above, will be our ground. Next, it's going to be something we want to be on top of the ground, but we'll always be able to walk in front of. So I'm just going to call this one walk in front. But these will be things like our staircase or maybe some plants on the floor. Next, we're going to need a specific layer for things that we collide with. This could be the base of a tree, a big rock, the base of our pillars. And why I say the base of the tree and the base of the pillars is because of our next layer, which will be walk behind. This will be where our player can walk behind them, like the top of our pillar here. Our player would disappear when walking behind it, or be able to walk behind the back of this building. The bottom half of the building will be collidable, and the top half will be on our walk behind layer. And then finally, just another extra one, handy for sprites you want to add on top of things like vines or plants growing or signs in front of houses. I just call this the decor layer. Now within all this, of course, we need our player to be on a sorting layer as well. So he actually falls between collision and walk behind. So we want to be in front of things that we collide with, but behind things we obviously want to walk behind. So cool. Hopefully that makes sense, and going into this will be a much simpler process. All right, let's get into it. So in Unity, first of all, sense and going in. Into this will be a much simpler process. All right, let's get into it. So in Unity, first of all, I'm going to want to grab the tile sets that we're going to be using. For this series, I'm using the Ninja Adventure asset pack. I'll link it below if you want to grab that. And in our asset pack, I'm going to go inside, and this time go inside the folder called backgrounds, then inside tile sets. And in here, I'm going to want to grab tile set floor. Then I'm going to hold down control and grab tile set house. With both of these selected, I'm going to drag them into our assets, then go into Unity. And in our assets, what I'm going to do is right
Bueno, más o menos.
click and go create folder at the very top and call this tile sets. I'm going to grab both of these and drag them into our tile sets folder. And you know what, while we're cleaning up, let's create a new folder again. I'm going to call this sprites, which is in our tile folder. And we're going to want to set up both of these just like we did for our player. So I'm going to hold down control and select both of these, set sprite mode to be multiple, pixels per unit to be 16, or whatever your sprites are set to. These sprites are all 16 by 16, filter mode to be point no filter, and compression to be none. Then click apply. Then you have to do this individually of your sprites, but click on, I'll go tile set floor first, click on sprite editor, then in the top there's a button that says slice. If you click on this, where you can click type and set that to be grid by cell size, pixel size, we want it to be 16 by 16, like we said, and then you can click the button down the bottom that says slice. Once that's all sliced up, you can click apply and then close this off. Let's do the same thing for tile set house. So sprite editor, slice, grid by cell size 16 by 16, click slice, and click apply. Cool, now if you open up these, you can see all our individual tiles cut into little pieces. Close that back up. Now to be able to paint on our scene, what we're gonna want is a new window. So in Unity, go to the very top where it says window, go down to 2D, and select tile palette. This will bring you a little pop-up. You can click on the tab at the top and drag it next to your inspector. And now, like it currently says, we don't have any valid palettes or targets. So over in your hierarchy, if you right click and go 2D object, tile map, and then we'll go to rectangular since we're using square-based tile maps. I'm going to click on our gizmos because that's turned off at the top. Now you can see automatically this has created us a grid, which will just hold our tile maps for us, and then a tile map, which our tile palette is automatically selected. We still have no valid palette, so if we click on this and then click create new palette, I'm going to name this ground, and then I'll click create. Inside this tile sets folder, I'm going to actually create a new folder to hold all our new palette information. So I'm going to call this ground palette. Double click on this, click select folder, and then what you can do is go into your assets, into your tile sets where we've got tile set floor, click on the overarching main image and drag this into your palette. When you let that go, it's going to pop up this window. I'm going to select our ground palette folder again, click select folder, and this will generate all our tiles for us. Now what this has done is created a palette for us, and like with any palette, like with anything like paint or whatever, where you select a color, you can click on one of these. So if I click on this green one down the bottom, you can now paint on your scene view. This doesn't work in your game view, It'll only work in the scene at the top. There's lots of different tools you can use at the top.
A ver.
Set information. So I'm going to call this ground palette. Double up and drag it next to your inspector. And now, like it currently says, we don't have any valid palettes or targets. So over in your hierarchy, if you right click and go 2D object, tile map, and then we'll go to rectangular since we're using square based tile maps. I'm going to click on our gizmos because that's turned off at the top. Now you can see automatically this has created us a grid, which will just hold our tile maps for us, and then a tile map, which our tile palette is automatically selected. We still have no valid palette, so if we click on this and then click create new palette, I'm going to name this ground, and then I'll click create. Inside this tilesets folder, I'm going to actually create a new folder to hold all our new palette information. So I'm going to call this ground palette. Double click on this, click select folder, and then what you can do is go into your assets, into your tilesets where we've got tileset floor, click on the overarching main image and drag this into your palette. When you let that go, it's going to pop up this window. I'm going to select our ground palette folder again, click select folder, and this will generate all our tiles for us. Now what this has done is created a palette for us, and like with any palette, like with anything like paint or whatever, where you select a color, you can click on one of these. So if I click on this green one down the bottom, you can now paint on your scene view. This doesn't work in your game view, it'll only work in the scene at the top. There's lots of different tools you can use at the top of your tile palette, like the eraser if you want to remove things, the fill bucket, like you can find in anything else, so I can fill in the middle of that if I drew a little square. And yeah, basically anything that you need to be able to paint. So like we had in our little notepad, we wanted different layers to play with. We've got our palette now for ground. So now let's create our ground tile map. We can use this one that we've already created. So if I go back to the inspector, on this tile map selected, I'm going to rename it to be ground. And for our layers to work properly, down in the tile map renderer, in additional settings, you have a sorting layer. All of this will be set to default by default. So let's click add sorting layer, and while we're here we can actually set up all our layers that we planned out. So we wanted ground, next walk in front, after that we wanted collision, then we said 3.5, which obviously isn't an option, will be our players layer, so we can actually add our player in here as well. Next will be walk behind and then decor. So let's add those quickly. Walk behind and then decor. Cool, so if we go back to our ground tile map, we can go to the sorting layer and I'll select ground. If I go to the tile palette, I'll show you. Right now, our player is hidden behind our ground. We've added our player layer, but we haven't set our player to this in the inspector. So let's select our player, and in Sprite Renderer, we've got the same sorting layer option. He's currently set to default, so let's set that to player. And there he is, pops up above. Just gonna draw us out a nice background. Beautiful. So this is all on our ground. Next, I'm gonna want something I can walk in front of.
Eh.
Folder at the top.
You guys have lays. We found the place.
¿Alguno tiene ley? Que se vaya acá.
The right side, and then I'm going to grab the middle and paint it on twice. So I've got a nice centered white staircase. Very
Hi guys, this is just a quick video covering this unit aware of create a new Unity. Is in the list. The update to do this. Then finally, we need to re-import the TMP essentials.
By the end of this video, we're going to get this little froggy running around the screen. Maybe not. Pixel Boys, itch.io. In fact, you're here to see, I'm going to go into separate animation, and then I'm going to bring in idle just for now. So I'm going to and drag this into my assets, and then back in Unity, I'm going to click on my player's idle, set the sprite mode to be multiple, the pixels per unit to be 16, filter mode to be point no filter, and compression to be none. Sprite mode is multiple because there are multiple sprites in this image. Pixels per unit to be 16 because that's the size of our individual pixel guys, 16 by 16. Filter mode to point no filter. This means that our pixels will be crisp and they won't go blurry. And our compression to be none, similar thing, means our pixels will be nice and crisp. Click apply. Now click on sprite editor. Click slice. Type to be grid by cell size. And now we can choose the size of our pixel. So like I said, it's 16 by 16. Then click slice to cut our image up, then click apply in the top right. And now if we close this down, you can see we've got this little arrow on our idle picture. If you click on this, you can see your individual sprites. I'm going to grab the first one of this and drag it into our game scene so that we now have a player game object created for us with our sprite that we drag it into our click on this, you can see your individual sprites. I'm going to grab the first one of this and drag it into our game scene so that we now have a player game object created for us with our sprite that we want. I'm going to rename this to be player, and you can see he looks a little funny in the game scene. This is because it's on free aspect. Click on this, you can see your individual sprites. I'm going to grab the first one of this and drag it into our game scene
fácil, ¿no?
so that we now have a player game object created for us with our sprite that we want. I'm going to rename this to be player, and you can see he looks a little funny in the game scene. This is because it's on free aspect and the pixels are a little warped.
No se ve.
If you
No se ve, maldito. Vale. Pues bueno, pues no se ve. Está ahí, oculto entre la maleza. Ahí está.
click this free aspect drop down and set this to be the size that you want it to be. I'm going to set mine to be full HD 1920 by 1080. And he still looks a little weird. It's because the scale is off. So if we set this, it is on 1.3. Set this back to ×1. Now he looks pixel perfect perfection. Okay, let's get on with the movement. So for our player to move, we're going to need to add a component. For game objects to be able to move, they need rigid bodies. To give them physics within the game. Because this is a top-down RPG and not a platformer, we're not actually going to be using any gravity. If we press play now, our character's just going to fall straight down. That's because his gravity scale is set to 1. So instead, let's set that to 0, so he'll no longer leave us. Cool, now because we're going to be using Unity's input system, which is their kind of new way of mapping our players' inputs. This makes it easy to implement different types of controls, like a controller or a keyboard. We're going to need to go to Window, Package Manager, and change the drop-down in the top left from In Project to Unity Registry. Then search for Input, and you should be able to see Input System pops up. If you click install and then wait for it to install, you get this pop-up asking if you want to restart the editor. You could say yes, and your Unity editor will close and then reopen. Now that's all installed, we can close this off. Then we'll click back on our player, scroll down and go add component and search for player input. You can see here under actions we currently have none. So if we click the button create actions, then click save, this will create us some default actions. Search for player input. You can see here under actions we currently have none. So if we click the button create actions, then click save, this will create us some default actions. All these actions are defined for us for now. You can open them up to take a look if you want to, but they just have all the basic key bindings that you would expect from any normal game you've ever played. So cool, we don't have to do anything with this, so we can close this off. And finally, we can write our player's movement script. So once again, click Add Component, and at the very bottom, click New Script, and I'm going to name this Player Movement. Cool, when that's ready, double click on it to open it up, and at the top we'll add in the variables we're going to need. First we'll add a private float for our movement speed, which I'm going to set to a default of 5F. Then a private rigid body 2D, which I'm going to call RB. And then we're also going to want a private vector 2 to store our move input. Now to be able to access our player's rigid body, in our start we're going to go rigid body equals get component, then triangle brackets, rigid body 2D. What this will do is try to get the component off of whatever this script is attached to, which is going to be our player. Now in our update we're going to use our rigid body and go rigid body dot velocity and set that to equal our move input times our move speed. Cool, now we need a way to set this move input using those actions we just created with the Unity input system. So down below,
Bueno.
we're going to write a new function called public void move. We're going to say input action dot callback context and call this context. You can see there's a red squiggly underline under input action. If you hover over this and then go show potential fixes, it'll suggest the correct import that we need to get this working. If you click on this, it adds it to the top. So now all we need to do is go move input equals context dot read value triangle brackets vector 2 and then close brackets. Cool, and that's it for the script. If we go back to Unity and go back to our player, we're going to have to make a way for our player input to communicate with our script. My favorite way to do this with Unity input system is to go to the behavior dropdown, which currently says send messages. Click on this and click invoke Unity events. Now you can see we've got this new events section. So if we open this up and then open up player, you can see we've got these 3 events. These events correlate to the events inside our top-down template input actions that we created earlier. So what we want to do is move our player. So let's click the plus under move. And now we have an empty object slot. So what I want to do is in the hierarchy, grab my player and drag it over to this empty slot. Now in the drop-down that says no function, we're going to click on this and go down to our player movement script and then click move. And guess what? That's it. If we now press play, I'm going to try moving my character around with the arrow keys. There he goes, there he goes. Very nice, very nice. Now I'm going to move him around with WASD. Very cool. Now, if you feel, oh, my player's too fast or too slow and I want to change his movement speed. But to do that, I'm going to have to go back into my script because it's a private field. See, if we scroll down our player movement script, you can't see any variables inside it. But if we go back to our movement script and in front of our private float move speed, type a square bracket and then serialize field and then another square bracket and save that. When you go back to Unity and you select your player, scroll down and you can now see your movement speed inside the inspector. Now you can see I'm moving at 5, let's say miles per hour. I can up this to 10 and he moves way faster, or to 2 and he moves way slower. Oh, he's so slow, like old man frog. You can do that with almost any variable to keep it both private but also editable in the inspector. If you edit this field while this is playing and then you unplay, play, you'll see it goes back to our default number 5. But if you edit this outside of our playing debug session, it'll stay to whatever value you give it. So if we press play again and scroll down, you'll see it's still set to 10, as I did that outside of the debug session. If I stop this again, it stays at 10. Using the serialized field makes it easy to test things, so it's very handy. Sorry if I went over any basics that you already knew, but I wanted to make sure we're all on the same page. Now, if you don't feel like doing any of this yourself, or something's gone wrong and you're not sure what, you can grab this whole package on my Patreon, or you can just grab the script for free. In the next video, we're going to get our character animated, so we're going to focus on the idle and walking animations. So cool, thank you for watching, I'll see you in the next.
Vale. Que sí. Venga.
Buenos días. Buenos días. Buenos días.
Lo sentimos. Más gente madrugadora va a llegar.
By the end of this video, we're going to have our player animated and walking around our game. We're also going to set up our idle sprites, which for me are just still static sprites, but I'll show you how to do animations for that as well. I'm currently using 4 directional sprites, but even if you have 8 directions, so your player can move diagonally, I'll also show you how to set that up. Link that below so you can asset pack, and if you don't have it yet, I'll link it below so you can download it. Characters, 1. And in here, we'll go to Actor, Characters, 1 walking animation. And if you haven't done this for your idle yet, you do is set Sprite Mode to be 16 to Sprite Editor. Click Slide 15, and we can close this off with the little X in the corner, and you'll see that all our sprites are now individually cut out. Next, to be able to do Animation, and then click Animation.
Vale. Si yo cojo esto. Piri, pi, 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 piri, pi, pi. Me gusta más así. Vale. Vale. Buah. Du, 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 du. Incluso mejor así. Bueno, no sé cómo va a salir. Probablemente quede amorfo. Pero es lo que hay. Voy a guardar esto y exportar como walking. Y ahora cierro esto. Y eh, 54, 64. Vale. Me ha costado. Un poquito de pixelar, rápido.
In next to your game view. Then we'll want another.
Vale. Hostia, las 8 menos 10. A ver.
Really quickly apparent is that we can't control this thing as we are. We are also going to need, and what that experimenting with like mental uplinks, like a mind meld kind of one from right, this monster. When we were leveling up, We didn't realize that we might have triggered something else out there in the void. The elder void spawn has awoken. It is pissed off. It doesn't like the fact that its title as the biggest, baddest entity in the cosmos is now in jeopardy. And as my boy Ken Watanabe once said, let them fight, and let them fight, we do.
So for the mothers out there, see what you can.
We are really, really excited.
Vale. Proseguimos,
Another one
pues.
from window animation called animator. And we'll leave
Tengo
that next
aquí
to our
animation,
scene view.
animator.
So now if you click on player
lo tengo todo.
and down in our animation window you'll see it says we can create an animator and an animation clip for our player by clicking this create button. If we click create, we can right click and go new folder and call this animation. Then double click on here to save all our animations in one place. I'm going to rename this animation walk down, as I'm first going to animate our frog walking down the screen, so facing towards us. I'm going to click save, and if we double click inside our animation folder, we'll now see we've got a player animator controller and a walk down animation clip. If we select our player in the hierarchy and scroll down, we can see this has added an animator component to our player and slotted in the player controller. If you go to the animator tab at the top, this is our player's animation controller and will be where all our animations appear, but we won't look at that for now. So now if we go back to our assets and open up our walking sprites, I'm going to click on our first sprite and then hold down Control and find all our sprites where our frog is facing us. So that's 0, 4, 8, and 12. I'm going to drag these over into our animation window. I'm going to zoom in on our frog. If in the top right of your scene view, you can click this little orb with dots. That will get rid of your gizmos so you can see your frog sprite better. If I press play, you'll see he walks very, very fast. To make this slower, what I'm going to do is drag this out to around the 1 second. Now if I press play, you'll see he walks and then at the very end he does a little jitter. This is because we're jumping back to the first frame really fast. So we never get to see that final frame. So if we zoom out and grab our final frame again, we can stick that 20 seconds later, since that's the spacing between all our sprites, at the very end to stop that from flickering. So now our froggy's doing a nice little run. Now we're going to want to do this for all our other directions. So making sure your player is selected where it says walk down in this animation section. If you click on this and then click create new clip, we'll be able to create a new animation. And next I'm going to do walk left. So walk left is going to be 2, 6, 10, and 14 for me, and whatever your sprites are for you. Drag them in.
Llega el nuevo Nescafé Kit Kat Mocha. Atrévete a mezclar las cosas.
Seguramente has escuchado que la inteligencia artificial va a cambiar el mundo. Te puedo asegurar que se están quedando cortos.
Por eso hemos creado la llamada del futuro, un entrenamiento gratuito de 3 días donde te enseñamos sin rodeos y sin tecnicismo.
Drag them out to 1. Grab the final frame and stick it in 120. Press play to check it out. There he goes. Again, walk right, 3, 7, 11, 15. Drag it in, drag it out, grab the final frame.
Mierda. Tontísimo, ¿no? Lo siguiente. ¡Ah! Antes que nada. Fuera, 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 fuera. Ahora sí. Vale. Ahora sí. No point, no 16. Aplicamos, abrimos esto, slide, ya está puesto, aplicamos. Lo abrimos aquí, walk down, vale. Vale, esto ha perdido sus cositas. Walk down, walk left, que antes lo he puesto mal. Walk right, right. Vale. Seguimos.
To 120. Test it with play. There he goes. And finally, walk up. It's 1, 5, 9, and 30.
Vale. Voy a sentar bien. ruido.
Drag it in, drag it out. Final frame, 120. And there he goes. If you want that to be a bit faster, what you can do is press Control and A, which will grab all your frames, and you can pull these in to whatever speed you want. So we could pull this back to be actually 1, which I actually prefer, and I'm going to go back and change all my sprites to do this. So just Control A and drag it to where you want to be. Cool. Now, even though my idle for this character doesn't have different sprites, I've only got a single sprite for each idle frame, I'm still going to want to create an animation. I'm still going to want to create an animation clip so that our animator has something to call just to make him stand still. So in the same drop down, I'm going to go create new clip and go idle down, drag in the single clip, create new clip.
Vale.
Clip, idle left, drag in the sprite. So this doesn't have the sprites for it, like me. What you could do is over here in the animation, there's a little record button. If you press that and drag your mouse to around 0.30, you could scale his Y down by going 0.9. Click on your first frames at 0, then do Control C to copy these. Move your cursor to the 1 second mark, do Control V to paste them. And then when you press play, you'll see your frog does this little in and out animation. We don't want his bottom half to actually be squeezing in and out like that. So if we go to the 0.30 second mark and do position in Y to be minus 0.1, then go back to the 0 mark and copy these frames back to the 1 second mark and paste that back over. Now when we press play, the frog does a kind of little bounce in place. Just about. It's not perfect. That's just an option if you don't want your character to be static. You could always just make your own frame of a sprite. I'm just going to keep him still while he idles. So I'm going to delete all of these and just leave it as a sprite. So he won't move while he's idling.
Deliciosas tabletas Kit Kat. Descubre sus nuevos sabores. Have a break.
Deja de ponerme gordo.
No me puedo creer que este curso de inteligencia artificial sea gratis. Si
Cállese, 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 cállese.
But cool, now we've got all our animations ready. We can check our animator scene and see every animation we've made is all collected up here. Now we're actually going to create something cleaner instead of having all of these different animations to look at. So you can select all of these by dragging your mouse over them and then press delete. Don't worry, they're still here in our assets. But what we're instead going to do is right click next to entry, hover over create state, and then click from new blend tree. We'll click on this blend tree and call it idle. So we're going to stick all our idle animations inside this one idle blend tree. We double click on this, and on our blend tree we can now see its details in the inspector. The blend type we're going to want to use is going to be 2D simple directional. And we're going to want two parameters inside here for our X and our Y. Over on the left we can create these parameters. So it will be selected on layers. You just have to click on the tab that says parameters. Then under here we have a plus. If you click on this and then click float. For our idle, what we're going to want to know is the last direction we've moved in. So you're moving, you're walking, and then when you stop, which direction have you stopped in? So we'll name this last input X. And we'll need another one. So click the plus, new float, called last input Y. Cool, now using these in our parameters, we're going to want to go last input X by last input Y. Now this motion is for the different directions that our player can face. Even though we only have 4 animations, a top-down character can move in 8 directions. So if this is our character, we can go up and down and left and right, like we know, but we can also move diagonally. So, I gotta draw all the arrows. So even though I don't have animations set up for these directions, I'm still going to want the correct sprite to display. If you do have sprites for diagonal movement, this is where you can put these in. So this will work for you if you've got 8 directional sprites as well, or if you've only got 4. So cool, what I meant by all that is that we need 8 motions in here. So click on the plus and go add new motion field. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times. Now we have to set up these position X and position Ys. You can see up the top here, this dot in the middle is our player, and we need to get all these little diamonds around the player in the correct position. So idle down is our character facing down towards us. Let's put that one in first, and our X will be 0. Because we're staying straight down the middle, and our position is going to be -1. You can see this move. Moves it straight down. So when our player is moving in this down position, we're going to play the idle down. Next, let's do idle left, so drag that into our next motion slot. Our Y, we want it to stay in the middle of our player, and our X, we want it to move over to the left, so that's -1. So idle left is -1 by 0. Idle right will be 1 by 0, since we want it to the right, and then 0 on the Y axis, straight in the middle. And then idle up, if you can guess, is 0 on the X and 1 on the Y. You can see now we've got our basic 4 directions. Next we need to set up our diagonals. So on your X position and Y position, we'll go 1, 1. So this is a diagonally right. For me, if I was walking diagonally right, and I only have 4 directional sprites to play with, I'm not going to use idle up, I'm going to use idle right. So if we're walking to the right in any way, it's going to be a right directional sprite. The other idle right we're going to do will be if we're walking to the right, so that will be 1 again, but down and right. So down towards the camera and right. This way, I'm sure you get what I mean. We'll walk in the right again, anything on the right side, right sprite. And then to the left, which will be -1 and 1. So that's top left, idle left again, -1 and -1. That'll be bottom left. So cool, hopefully that all made sense. What we're going to want to do now is click on base layer at the top, right click next to idle, create state, and go from... new blend tree, click on this, and I'm going to name this walk. So this is going to be our walking animations or running animations, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to
Tito Mosca, ¿me estás escuchando? Eres un pedazo de mierdas. Ojo al dato, Tito Mosca. Ojo a esto, ¿eh? ¿Me estás viendo? Uy, se ha metido un tío de... Parece los del repo. ¿Quién parece los del repo? Ah, este. Mira, mira qué pibe. Míralo. Mira cómo te mira, prejuzgándote. Y está, le he hecho una animación ahí chiquititas. Está bien. Ah, espérate, espérate. Ah, claro, me ha quitado las animaciones. Mira el terreno. Tremendo terrenillo, ¿eh? Tiene capas y todo. Y su cosa ahí. Una murallita para probar, que pueda pasar por abajo. Está bien. Pero estaba con las animaciones. Estaba con las animaciones. Ahora voy a seguir. A ver si antes de las 9 tengo algo
Click on our blend tree.
usable.
Exactly the same. Blend type we want to be 2D, simple directional. And now our parameters, we want some new parameters again. So we don't want our last inputs. We actually want a live feed of our current inputs. So I'm going to just call this input X, click on the plus, new float, input Y. So these will update as our player pushes in an input, either by keyboard or controller. And on our parameters drop down, change from blend to input X, and then input Y. And once again, I want 8 different motions. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Cool, so again, I'll speed for it this time since you kind of know what I'm doing. But we've got walk down, -1. Walk left, walk right, walk up. So walk left, -1 by 0.
¡Ah! Va muy rápido. Dice walk down, left, right, up. Vale. Y ahora esto es -1. Esto es -1.
Walk right 1 by 0, walk up 0 by 1, and then our diagonals will be walk right, 1, 1 in the X, -1 and 1. Okay, I'm saying that weird. You can look at my screen so you don't get messed up. Walk left, first walk left be -1 by 1, then the second is -1 by 1.
Esto es 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, menos 1, 1, 1, menos 1.
-1. So you should have all of these diamonds circling around. It doesn't matter what order your motions are in. See, I can drag these around, it doesn't do anything. Just as long as your positions are correct with this animation clip. So cool. One more thing to do in the animator, which is if we go back to our base layer and zoom on in, we're going to need to set up our transitions. So I'm actually going to drag this down below our entry. Makes no difference. I'm just doing it so I can zoom in easier for you. So our base entry point, when our player enters the scene, is going to go straight into idling, which is great. Now we want to right click on idle and click make transition and drag this over to our walk. So we want to be able to go from idling to walking. You can click on this transition by clicking on this line arrow. And over here in the settings, I'm going to open up the settings panel so we can see it some more. And what we want to do here is untick has exit time, untick fixed duration, and set transition duration to 0. What this means is that as soon as we start walking, we want to show the walking animation. We don't want it to wait at all for any idle animations to end. We want it to be an instant switch. Now we need to know when we want to start walking. So down the bottom, we can add in conditions. If you click the plus, you'll see we can use one of our parameters as a way to check if we're moving or not. To make it real simple, over in our parameters, click the plus, click bool. And call this is walking. Now just a heads up, your casing does matter in these animation strings. And by casing, I mean the capital letters. So I've done lowercase I and capital W in is walking. If I typed this wrong when using this in my code, it won't work. So make sure your casing is the way you like it. in the way you'll remember. Now back to our idle to walk transition. In conditions, we can now click on this drop down and click is walking. So if is walking is true, we want to start walking. If we now click on our walk animation, we can right click on this, click make transition, and click back to idle. Click on this arrow pointing towards idle, and we're going to want the same steps. Untick has exit time, untick fixed duration, set transition duration to 0, add our condition down the bottom, go is walking, and we want it to be if is walking is set to false. So we're no longer walking, we want to go back to idle. Cool, so now our animator's all set up. Next thing to do is get into the code and get our animations playing. So I'm going to click on my player and scroll down to our player movement script. I can double click on this to open it up, and then at the top in our variables I'm going to type private animator called animator. And in our start, same way we did for our rigid body, I'm going to go animator equals get component and pass in animator. So we can grab our animator component off of our player. Now in our move function, at the very top we can go animator dot set ball, and inside our brackets we want to pass in the name of our parameter inside our animator that we want to set. There's a tongue twister. Name of our parameter inside our animator. Name of our parameter inside our animator. Blah 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 blah. Okay. So we want to set is walking to be true. Then after we've got our move input, we can use this to set in our animator's input X and input Y, which we use for our walking animation. So let's go animator dot set float and pass in input X, comma, and we can use our move input and say dot X. If we hold down Control and then press D, you can duplicate this line, change input X to input Y, and move input dot X to move input dot Y. So cool, now we know when we're walking, we're going to set it to true, and when we're moving, we'll be able to grab our move input X and Y. But how do we know when we've stopped walking, and how do we store our last X and Y for our idle animation? Well, I'm glad you asked, because I know the answer. Underneath where I set is walking, I'm going to go if our context is dot cancelled, which is something that gets set if we've let go of our button or sprung our joystick on our controller back to the center. Then we'll set our animator dot set ball is walking to be false. Our animator dot set float last input X to be our move input dot X. Because we haven't set this yet, this will be our last input that we've done before we stopped, since we haven't reread the value to be 0 yet. So make sure this does happen before you set your move input to be the new context read value. And then again we can do Control D on this line and change last input X to Y and move input dot Y. So just to make it easy, we always set is walking to true at the top, and then we check actually has it been cancelled, and if it has, we set this back to false. And guess what? That's all we need in the code.
Ya casi
So let's go back to
terminamos.
Unity. Now if I press play, you can see with the animator open, this is playing our idle over and over again. It looks a little scary, but that's just because I only have one frame, so it's just calling that frame again and again. Now if I walk, you can see our walking animation plays and it moves in all our different directions. You can see our parameters are flickering around at the top as well. They're all changing. And when we stop moving, it saves our last direction. If we double click on our walk blend tree, it's pretty cool. You can see this triggering all our different paths. But cool, we've got our little guy animated.
Va como haciendo
Like I said,
squeezy.
this will work for 8 directional if you've got the sprites for it. Just have to drag them into the right spots.
Creo que va demasiado rápido la
I've got
animación.
another video on it if you want to see it more clearly with the 8 directional sprites.
A ver, voy a
So
bajarlo
yeah,
un poquito.
all done.
Cállese, señora.
As well, they're all changing. Click on our walk blend tree. It's pretty cool. You can see this triggering all our different paths. But cool, we've got our little guy animated. Like I said, this will work for 8 directional if you've got the sprites for it. Just have to drag them into the right spots into your blend tree. I've got another video on it if you want to see it more clearly with the 8 directional sprites. But yeah, all done. If you don't feel like animating this yourself and you want to grab this whole package, you can grab it on my Patreon, as well as every other script I've ever written.
Vale. Otro menos. Poco a poco. Animaciones del personaje. A ver. Walk. Vamos a meter un poquito más de amor. Bastante good. Vale. ¿Y si activo mi grid? Es que si activo mi grid, el personaje no está en el grid, tío. No sé exactamente por qué. Es que... bueno, da igual. Da igual. Ahora.
Un mundo más Pepe es compensarte si cometemos un fallo. Fibra y móvil con principios. Llámanos gratis al 1706. Pepefon.
Para, por favor.
In the tile map renderer, in additional settings, you have a sorting layer. All of this will be set to default by default. So let's click add a sorting layer, and while we're here we can actually set up all our layers that we planned out. So we wanted ground, viewpoint flare in here, walk behind, and then decor. Cool, so if we go back to our ground tile map and go to the sorting layer, and I'll select ground. If I go to the tile palette, I'll show you. Right now our player is hidden behind our ground. We've added our player layer.
¿Cómo? Mira, mira este combo Orisa. Mira este combo Orisa, Crappy. Yes. Demasiado increíble. Increíble. ¿Te lo has perdido? No te preocupes, aquí lo tengo. Mira. Con calidad de 720 puñetazos los ojos.
Un saludo desde este pequeño lugar del espacio, soy Ignis y sed bienvenido a la tercera parte de la guía de combate de Stellaris. En esta...
But we haven't set our player to this in the inspector. So let's select our player, and in sprite renderer we've got the same sorting layer option. He's currently set to default, so let's set that to player. And there he is.
Aquí. Me he perdido. ¿Cuándo he hecho eso? Ay, la madre que me parió. Sí, ahí está, míralo.
Our ground tile map for you. I can want examples. So let's click on ground in our tile palette and go create new palette. Go to tile select folder and show you, and it'll put this onto a different layer. Tile map rectangular, and I'll call this walk in selected. Be good. And tiles to place sprites you want to select, and then paint it onto your scene. So you can see what I'm gonna do is grab and paint it front if I behind this Eva something. Okay, very cool. Now again on top of the staircase, so he doesn't get hidden behind this Eva. Okay, very cool. Now next in our list, let's get our player colliding with something in our layers. So again on our grid, let's right click, 2D object, tile map,
¿Funcionará? ¡No funciona! ¡Sí! Uy, mira, pero esto sí funciona. ¿Esto no funciona? Esto sí funciona. Joder, qué guay. Nada, increíble. Me tengo que pasar por aquí. Tengo que pasar por aquí. ¡Chup!
Rectangular. I'll call this collision. In the inspector, I'm going to select collision and set our sorting layer to be collision. Cool. Now, before we actually make this collidable, we'll draw on some things to collide with. And you know what? Everything's beige, so let's change the grass color to green so we can actually see these better. Back to houses. So first, make sure you've got collision selected on the top. So let's select our pillar and stick it on our scene. Now, of course, right now, our player can just walk right over it because there is no collision set to this. So click on your collision tile map in the hierarchy. Go to the inspector and we're going to add some components. If you click add component and search for tile map, we'll want to add the tile map collider 2D. For things to be collidable as well, they need rigid bodies. So let's add a rigid body 2D. And because this isn't going to be moving anywhere, we can set this to static. Now we're not done yet because this isn't going to be moving anywhere, we can set this to static. Now we're not done yet because our player actually doesn't have any collision boxes on it. So let's go to our player and go add component and search for a box collider 2D because he's a bit square. Cool, I'm going to click edit collider and zoom in and drag this down so it hits just the top of his head. So he doesn't go bumping into things before he's actually touched them on our scene. Cool, so now when we press bed, so he doesn't go bumping into things before he's actually touched them on. On our scene. Cool, so now when we press play, we walk into our pillar and we
¡Yo! Se ha doblado. Se ha doblado el pibe calavera. ¡Epa! Al pixel, papi. Vale, y esto... Oh, mierda. Hostia. No. Se dobló. Se ha puesto al revés. Deja de dar vueltas. Maldita sea. Opa. Ha entrado. Pero... Vale. Es que claro, tiene que entrar al putísimo píxel. Es muy difícil. Bueno, vale. Por mañana no se gira. A ver, voy a marcar esto. Vale.
Bump into it. I can't get through. Oh, and my guy's spinning. Okay, to stop your guy from spinning, back on our player, in our rigid body 2D, we want to go to constraints and freeze Z rotation. That way it doesn't spin, unless you want your player to spin around. It's up to you. No judgment. Okay, so cool. We've got him colliding now. Next, we want to do walk behind. So on our grid, right click, 2D object, tile map, rectangular, walk behind. And we don't need any collisions for this because we want to be able to pass right through. But we do want to set our sorting layer to be walk behind. Don't forget that step. So let's go to the tile palette, select our tile map in the top to be walk behind. And then I'm going to go in and grab the very top of our pillar and stick this on the walk behind. So he'll collide with the bottom, but he'll be able to walk behind the top of the pillar. So if I press play to test this out, I bump into the pillar at the bottom, but I can walk behind the top of the pillar. Very cool.
Vale, pero esto tiene que ir aquí, aquí. Y esto va fuera. Fuera. Y ahora me vengo aquí. Tile map. Mierda. Bueno. Y aquí abajito me voy a hacer un poquito de esto y un poquito de lo otro. A ver. Esta es la 3.1. Vale. Así es que esto es un coñazo, claro, cada vez que tengo que... Ah. Esto va a doler. Ah. Vale. Y ahora hago así. Voy literalmente en fly, chavales. Sí. Vale. Voy a hacer una última cosica. Aunque ya no me va a dar tiempo, pero bueno. Déjale aquí. Venga. Vale. Ahora cojo esto, le meto aquí un rellenito, por ejemplo, un negro pero. Opa. Pues muy bien. Pues muy bien. Pues muy bien, tío, pues muy bien. Y ahora pues sí. Y ya no me pueden salir. ¡Ostras! ¡Qué guapardísimo, papi! Pues ya estaría, ¿no? GG, easy peasy. Pues se ha quedado buena tarde, tío. Pues nada, hasta aquí. Ha sido un día productivo. Script position out of view frustum. No tengo ni idea de lo que es, pero vale. Ha sido un día productivo, no me voy a quejar. Bueno, en fin. Tito Mosca trabaja